Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. I have got a very special guest today. You will know him already, I'm sure. He's quite a legend in the Game of Thrones community and a really good friend of mine, and also an incredibly handsome man. Please give it up for Kyle. Kyle, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, hey everyone. The reason why we're smiling so much is Robert literally took off his glasses and took a huge swig of wine before starting the live. So we are notably prepared to talk about Valyrian Steel today. But I'm Kyle. In case any of you don't know who I am, I run the Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire channel called Azor Ahype. Thank you for having me, Robert.
An absolute pleasure as always. And for the record, that was unfermented grape juice. We're talking about Valyrian Steel today. Guys, as always, I've got a whole load of questions from my patrons. Patrons' questions will always get priority. We also had a few super chats. Thank you very much for people who gave super chats before we even started. That's amazingly generous.
Maura Lee is the queen of super chats.
Well, yeah. Where I was going to go. I was going to come to it, but Maura Lee, thank you so much. In particular, Maura was, I think it was $50, which is incredibly generous. Thank you so much. Just saying to Robert and Kyle, love you both. Thank you for all the wonderful content you both provide on your channels and for all of us on Patreon. Thank you, Maura. That is exceptionally generous, and I know that Kyle and I both really appreciate it. I think what we'll do is the other couple of super chats we got, we'll get to them in just one moment. But what I wanted to do first of all is, and with all super chats, obviously we'll get to them really soon. I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page when we start off what Valyrian Steel is, what we actually know, and then we'll get into there. We've got a lot of questions about specific Valyrian Steel swords and the like, and what it might mean for the end game and things like that. But Kyle, do you want to just give us the 1 minute version? What is Valyrian Steel? What do we actually know?
Robert, I'll do it even better for you. I'll do a 30-second version. So Valyrian Steel originated in Old Valyria, which was this great empire that we had in A Song of Ice and Fire. And these blades are specifically forged with magic. And George has talked about how these blades are special. They are different from your average iron or steel blades. And these blades either require dragon fire, what we actually believe, or some sort of blood magic or magic to forge them. Now, a lot of people think that also dragon glass could be kind of in the same family as Valyrian Steel. But Valyrian Steel did originate when the Valyrian Empire was at its peak. So, sorry, there's a plane flying overhead, everyone. I apologize if you hear that. But yeah, so basically, Valyrian Steel can be relatable to real-world Damascus steel, and it's been folded over like 1,000 times. So it's really, really durable and special in that sort of way. So Valyrian Steel, special blades.
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent summary. So we've got this these blades which are lighter, they're sharper, they're longer lasting than normal blades, and they are incredibly rare. And one of the maesters, I've forgotten which one, did this list of all the Valyrian Steel blades we have in Westeros, and he came to 227. But of those 227, quite a few of them have been lost, and a few of those are quite interesting ones, like Dark Sister and Blackfire and things like that we can come to in a moment. And the secret itself of making it is also lost, but some people have the secret of how to reforge it, how once you've got a lump or a sword of Valyrian Steel, how you can reforge it into something else. So we've got some of the understanding of how to do it, but not how to make it originally. So Carl, can I put to you, as we're on this subject of making it, and you were talking about dragonfire and blood sacrifice and things like that. Sarah O'Connor, Fine Art, thank you so much for the super chat. And also, incidentally, I did get your email. I will reply to it as soon as I get a moment, saying great content. Theory: to create Valyrian Steel, you need dragonfire and blood sacrifice. Reworking it doesn't require dragonfire, but it does require blood sacrifice. Discuss. What do you think? So do you think, what do you think is the difference between having it to start with, forging it to start with, and reforging it? What's the difference in terms of sort of magic and ingredients?
I mean, I think to start with, dragons are the main ingredient, right? I mean, dragon flame, Robert, is magical. I think we both agree on that. To have a special type of fire to forge a special type of blade is very interesting. Obviously, both in the book and the show. I mean, the Tobomont isn't mentioned in the show, but the Cohoric Smith Tobomont knows how to reforge Valyrian steel. There was no blood magic used then, I believe. I mean, some people believe that the death of Ned Stark allowed for that. I mean, I don't really understand that, but I mean, it was forged into two different blades. Now, this specific, when ice was forged into Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail, there was actually no blood sacrifice to make it. I mean, but the death of Ned Stark, I mean, he lost his blade and the Lannisters took it. So, yeah, I mean, the main difference is dragon fire, dragon flame, and that's what's magical about it.
Yeah, I'd agree. So the magic happens in the creation of it to start with, in my view. I think that when you're making Valyrian steel, that's when the magic, and the dragonfire, obviously they don't need it to reforge it, because we've had the maesters have been reforging it and things like that, and they've certainly not got dragonfire. So the magic happens and all the magical ingredients happen in the first forging. Reforging it requires great technical expertise that we know that Tobbo Mott you're talking about, who's the great blacksmith in King's Landing. The maesters have also got it, and then there's also some people off somewhere in the far east of Essos know how to do this as well. So a few people know how to reforge it, and that seems to imply to me that it's not the magic is not involved at that stage. The magic is involved a little bit earlier, and perhaps we'll get a little bit more into what the actual magic is. But Carl, sorry, what were you wanting to say?
I was just going to say some people have brought up the 14 fires, and they believe that dragons possibly have come from these volcanoes. I don't know if anybody's seen the new Godzilla trailer, but Rodan is a mythical beast within the Godzilla mythology, and in the new movie, it looks like he's being reawakened from a volcano. He's this like fiery bird / pterodactyl. Maybe that magic is the magic of the earth. What we perceive as magic, but is actually science, Robert. Just like just like we have dragon glasses, there's some sort of chemical process that happens for that to go down. But dragons are fire made flesh, Robert. I mean, and if we're talking about magical things, we obviously see the White Walkers, which is the ice and fire opposition going on. So dragons for me are the main ingredient, and we like you said, Rob, we haven't seen basically any of that because we don't have really any of the look back into pre-Doom Valyria, what was really going on there. So yeah, we just assume that it's dragon fire and dragon flame.
I think that's a reasonable assumption. So every bit of old Valyrian magic that we know about seems to involve fire and blood. That's why these are the Targaryen words. That's what it's all about. So everything we see when the Dany's dragons are born, that seems to involve fire and blood. When we get all these other sacrifices, bits of magic seem to involve sacrifices of blood, and fire seems to be involved in every time that this is Valyrian magic. So it would be, to me, inconceivable that creation of Valyrian steel does not include those two elements in some way, shape or form. But we had another super chat from Christy Miller saying, does the book differ from the show about Valyrian steel? Awesome channel and continue the good work. Thank you very much for that. Carl, what do you think in terms of the book differing from the show on Valyrian steel? I think they're probably quite similar. It's just that the show has shown a few more of the different qualities of it, shall we say. Is there anything, you've got any thoughts on that?
One thing in particular, Samuel, when he reads about dragon steel, that is specifically mentioned as dragon steel, him and Jon Snow are talking about that. I don't think that's ever specifically referenced in the show. Is it referenced in the show, Robert, as dragon steel? I can't remember.
I don't think as dragon steel. No, I think that they're trying to keep it as simple as possible for show people, which is entirely fair. So they are trying to keep it to Valyrian steel and dragon glass. Yeah,
I mean, obviously the dragons belong to the Valyrians, or at least associated to the Valyrians. I mean, there was many other great houses other than the Valyrians, and the prime of Valyria. But yeah, there is not much. There's actually not a ton of information on Valyrian Steel in the books, Robert. Like in a Game of Thrones, we know that that Ned uses the sword as an execution on Garrett, a deserter of the Night's Watch. We also obviously know that Ned gets his head chopped off in King's Landing by Ilan Payne with his own blade. We have the cat's paw dagger, which is used as an assassination attempt on Bran. In the Storm of Swords in the books, I know Tobo Amont is. I mean, we have a character that we can actually associate with the name in the books. In the show, that's actually different. He is not named. It's just a Cohoric Smith. So. And that, I guess that's the kind of big difference, is that Gendry is actually an apprentice of Tobo Amont, which is a huge deal, right? Because Gendry is the one person we look to as a blacksmith within the Song of Ice and Fire, really. If someone is going to, later on in the story, the next two books, we don't have the Winds of Winter and the Dream of Spring. I think Gendry is kind of a dead ringer for someone who is probably going to be part of either reforging Valyrian Steel, at least trying to make it again, whether it's with Samuel Tarly bringing books from the Citadel or Bran or something like that. I think that's kind of where we're going with it. But there is not a ton on Valyrian Steel, just in general in the books, Robert.
No, it's kind of dotted about, and just there on Gendry. I always think, so fans of literary theory will understand what I'm saying. I tend to think of him as kind of Chekhov's blacksmith. We know that he's there. He's got these skills that theoretically would mean that he can reforge Valyrian Steel. Surely this means that at some point he's going to have a go at that, because we know that Valyrian Steel is important. What I was kind of alluding to just before Carl was talking about, we've seen more of it in action. So on the show, we've seen Valyrian Steel up against White Walkers in a way that we haven't so much really in the books, and so that has kind of created this on the show, these two different ways to defeat the White Walkers, being Valyrian Steel, three ways really: Valyrian Steel, Dragonglass, and then we get fire to be defeating the Whites, and so we get these three different ways. That's not yet, because we've got so much less about the others in the books that hasn't come through quite as strongly, but I think it probably
we don't even have Hardhome. I mean, we have hints that something really bad may be going down at Hardhome soon, but we're not even there yet. So there is so much that needs to, there's some sort of other vehicle. That's what happens when I'm sitting in Dorne, sitting outside making a little sacrifice. I apologize, everyone, if there's noise in the background. Yeah, Robert, I mean, I don't know. And that's one thing that I think that George really, really needs to kind of go off on in the Winds of Winter, is that we obviously need to know more about Valyrian Steel, but obviously in the show, I don't know if we're going to get Winds of Winter before Game of Thrones Season 8 comes out. The chances are very slim that happens. But, Robert, we have Fire and Blood coming out before Game of Thrones Season 8. So, and that book focuses on Targaryen. So we certainly could get at least a few mentions of Valyrian Steel there. I mean, Aegon's going to be there. He's going to be I believe the first chapter in Fire and Blood, Robert. So, I mean, he's the one who built the Iron Throne, and him and his sister wives had Valyrian Steel, and then it kind of just goes on from there. So that's going to be really interesting to see if maybe George drops us some bombs in Fire and Blood above Valyrian Steel.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic if he did. I mean, I think that what we'll see in Fire and Blood, November the 20th, by the way, everyone, I hope you've pre-ordered, is that we've got Blackfire and Dark Sister, who are the two Targaryen family Valyrian Steel swords that through this whole period in Fire and Blood Part 1, they belong to the Targaryen family. So we will probably see them again and again. We'll probably learn about a few more different Targaryens who were wielding them, and perhaps we might get a few hints about the different things that you can do with it. George R. R. Martin's been very clear. Targaryen steel is magical, which means that it has magical properties. Now, at the moment, that's kind of theoretical more than anything else. The only thing that we've seen, particularly, as I said on the show, is the fact that these are one of the few things that can actually kill the White Walkers, but we haven't seen much else. So I think perhaps we're going to start at some point. It might be in Fire and Blood, or it might be in TWOW, as I like to call it, or I got that from LML, that maybe that's going to tell us a little bit more about it. I certainly hope so. I just wanted to very quickly say thank you very much to Leah Mickley with 20, I think that's 20 Canadian dollars. I've absolutely no idea how much that is in real money, but that's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
She's a patron of my channel. I don't know if she's a patron of yours, but thank you, Leah. Really appreciate that.
It's very generous indeed. I want to come now to start thinking about a few specific Targaryen steel swords, because I know that we had a super chat from Anime Lover. Thank you very much. That was very kind. Just before we went live, saying, I have to miss this stream. It's late and I have to rise early tomorrow morning. I totally understand that. Quick question. The sword that Mira took, is that Dark Sister? Now, this is something I've mentioned in videos a couple of times. This idea that Dark Sister, for those who don't know, Dark Sister is one of the 2 Targaryen family swords. The last known owner of that was Bloodraven. And we had confirmation, actually, I think it was via Aziz at where was it? Was it Dragon Con or was it Comic Con? I can't remember.
Repeat that, Robert. Sorry.
So George R. R. Martin confirmed recently at one of the conventions.
I was there, but by the way, that was in Redwood City in California. That was August 13th. George R. R. Martin with John Picasio in San Francisco.
Absolutely, and he confirmed in Q&A that Bloodraven took Dark Sister up to the wall when he went up to the wall. So that's the last known location and the last known owner of it. Now, I have theorized, a number of other people have theorized, that it makes sense, as it's not at the wall, that he took it north of the wall when he went north of the wall. So that would seem to imply that the last known place of it is actually in the Three-Eyed Crow, Three-Eyed Raven's cave north of the wall. So if that's there, are we going to see it? Is Bran is the person who's there? Mira's up there. Are we going to see it again in the books or on the show? And on the show there was this moment, and it was a couple of seconds, but when they were fleeing the cave, when Bran did the bad thing and they all had to run away, then we saw Mira just grabbed a sword on her way out. It was just propped up against the wall. She just grabbed it and they went. Now, do you think that sword was Dark Sister?
In the books, absolutely it is. And here's, I'm not trying to say what happened in the show is going to influence the books, but they're going to Hold the Door is going to be canon in the books. That's one of the 3 things that George told Dan and Dave that is going to be possibly of the 3 biggest moments left in the Game of Thrones. So one was Shireen burning at the stake. Another one was Hold the Door with Hodor. We don't know the other one. I think that what's going to happen in that cave in the books is, Mira shoots that dragon glass spear into a White Walker. I think she's going to use a Valyrian steel blade in the books. And I think that Mira's going to have a much bigger role, and so is Howland Reed in the books. In the show, I don't know if we're getting that at all. I don't even know if Mira Reed is in Game of Thrones Season 8, which would be incredibly disappointing, I think. So in the books, it's a far, far greater possibility. Now, in the show, they need as many Valyrian steel blades as they can get. I will remain optimistic that there is still a chance that we will see House Reed in Game of Thrones Season 8. This could be one of the big things that they're surprising us with. We got to remember that they did do multiple scripts and they had drone killers and all sorts of stuff for Season 8. But we'll just leave that open. But in the books, yeah, I do think there's a really good possibility that it's in that cave, man. I really do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So my view is that was indeed Dark Sister. I think that on the show, this is just one of those little nods that they're doing to what's the kind of things that the book nerds like us, we care about. So we had this situation when in the flashback to the Tower of Joy, when we see the sword Dawn just like propped up against the bed, and I think that was very deliberately they focused on that for a couple of seconds. I think that was a deliberate thing to say, yeah, we know this is an important sword. We're not going to talk about it much on the show, but we're recognizing that it's an important sword. Similarly with the Horn of Winter, we saw when they found that cache of dragon glass and Sam was there and there was a horn in there. They don't really mention it again. I think it's going to be really important in the books, but on the show, They just like showed it. So I think this is going to be one of those things where they're just doing a little nod to the book readers to say, yes, we recognize that this is a thing and this is going to happen. In the books, I think, yes, absolutely it will come down with Bran and Mira. In whatever way they come down, I don't think it's going to happen in the exact same way in the books, but whatever way they come down from the north back down south of the wall, they will bring with them Dark Sister, I believe. That's what makes sense to me thematically and as a sort of a rounding off of the hints that we've got about what happened to Dark Sister.
Speaking about hints, Robert, one thing that I did want to mention is when it comes to prophecy visually in the show, it's a completely different medium than writing a book. So when you're reading a book, George R. R. Martin can insert all of these red herrings, and because we perceive things from our own perspective, we each have a unique perspective. We can kind of theorize or try to put things together based on foreshadowings from other moments throughout the books and whatnot. In the show, the one thing that you're talking about specifically with Dawn, when we get the prophecy bleeding under, under the bleeding star, all of that, Robert, that is much more so because it has happened before. I mean, there's the red comment in the show, but to describe it or show it, they have to be a lot more subtle, because if they just hit you over the head with it, it's going to be completely obvious. It's like, why didn't they give us hints that Rhaegar was Jon's father earlier in the show? Like, I mean, do you really want them to give it all away? It is a lot harder, I think, in the show. And they do have to dumb things down. So no offense, show watchers. I think, I know a lot of show watchers that have come up with theories and know things about the books without even reading the books. I'm not thinking any less of you guys. But yeah, so that's kind of really interesting that you say that, these little hints. I don't know. Is that even a hint though, Robert? That was such a small thing though for Dark Sister. I mean,
I think Tyler D in the chat got it right. I think so. D&D are basically winking at the book readers with Dark Sister. I don't think anything will come of it. I think that's basically what it is. They're just saying, right, yeah, okay, so here we go. Here's the thing. Like with when they showed Dawn there propped up, it's like going, look, here's a really important sword, which is really cool. It's got a whole load of history. We're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to show you that we know it's there and it's part of the world. So I think basically that's it. If we take it as like an Easter egg or just like a nod or a wink or something like that, that is how I see it.
Easter egg is the right word then, because it's very brief.
I think I'd agree completely. Okay, let's go to another question from one of my patrons. Let's talk Debbie Buckles. Hi, Debbie. Thank you very much for this. So let's talk about the knife that Arya got from Bran. So questioning, is the name Dragon's Claw? Let's talk about that first of all. Do we have a name? And secondly, Kyle, do you want to just talk a little bit of background about what this is, and then perhaps we can speculate about where it might go, because it's the dagger that was used as an attempted assassination on Bran way back in season 1, isn't it?
So it's specifically referenced as the cat's paw dagger because that's the name of the assassin that's what they labeled the assassin that was sent to kill Bran. It's interesting though, we did get some new information on this in Game of Thrones season 7, Robert, when Samuel Tarly is reading through the book when just before he tells Jon that there's a dragon glass cave on Dragonstone, that dagger belonged to Aegon Targaryen. And we now know that Jon's real name is Aegon, at least in the show. So that is very interesting that Bran handed it to Arya. Now, in the War for Dawn, specifically, Robert, I think that there is going to be a small group of fighters that are able to really wield Valyrian steel weapons and go toe-to-toe with the White Walker. Some that come to mind are my beautiful Gwendolyn Christie, who I have on my shirt here. I don't know if a lot of you recognized her. You guys call me Baby Tormund all the time, so I got to represent my bae, Gwendolyn Christie. But Arya having that blade is really interesting. I don't have any real theories on that, her using it. Maybe she will kill a White Walker. I could see her and Jon fighting side by side, or her and Sandor could even get a blade too. Something, he's a big guy and he's hard to kill. That would be really interesting. But I think it's really interesting, the information specifically, Robert, that we got, that it belonged to Aegon, the first Targaryen, and it was Now a Stark is holding a Valyrian steel blade. Really interesting. Another Valyrian steel dagger.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that was a really good point about the on the show. What we do have now is a whole group of people with the ability to kill White Walkers because they're holding Valyrian steel blades. So we've got Jon has Longclaw, we've got Brienne, as you say, she had Oathkeeper. We've got Jaime, who's heading north of the Wall. He's got Widow's Wail. We've got Arya, who's currently got the Cat's Paw dagger, and so you've got this whole series, and also Sam, incidentally, went up there with Heartsbane, his family sword as well. So there's a lot. There's now 5, if I've been counting right, Valyrian steel blades up there in the defense of Winterfell and the north. So that's now it's a group who can actually take them on. So suddenly, what looked like an invulnerable, indomitable army is looking a lot more vulnerable, and I think that's quite an important in the book. That's quite an important shift. I want to bring us to super chat. Thank you very much, $20. That's very kind, Richard Hopp, saying the hard, and this is bringing us back to the nature of Valyrian steel and the forging of it. The hardness sufficient to maintain an edge comes at the cost of brittleness. The softer steel is durable but won't hold its edge long. Hardness and durability must be the primary qualities of Valyrian steel. I think that's really important, and I think one of the things that that comes out is that we durability is a thing we don't talk about huge amounts, but some of these Valyrian steel swords are very old. They're hundreds of years old, and they still remain sharp and strong all the way through. And it's very clear that they have been made strong through the process of being made as well. So, Kyle, is there anything you want to just to sort of riff off of that, about this idea about this is about both hardness, sharpness, and durability?
Well, there's 2 really interesting quotes that directly come from George R. R. Martin himself, Robert. Valyrian steel is a fantasy metal. Can you guys hear that in the background? Can you hear it, Robert?
I can hear some birds in the background.
Okay. Valyrian steel is
I just have to say, by the way, Carl, please just stop calling attention to what a wonderful place you're in, because it's just starting to really great now. It's just like, yeah, you're in a wonderful, beautiful place, just sat out there outside. We love it. Not at all jealous.
Valyrian steel is a fantasy metal, which means it has magical characteristics, and magic plays a huge role in its forging. Valyrian steel was always costly, but became considerably more so when there was no more Valyria. So just touching on the points that you just talked about, Robert. First of all, there's magic that has helped made it, and it's incredibly rare. So that, I think the magic obviously plays a big part in why it's able to endure for so long. We know that people literally paid a ransom for a kingdom for one Valyrian steel blade. Like, that's how much it was worth. It could, like, in the hands of someone like a Sir Barristan Selmy or Jaime Lannister, they could literally, take out the main commanders or the kind of the main opposing best fighters of the opposition in. It's significant advantage when you have a Valyrian steel blade. So I don't know too much about forging blades in real life or anything like that, but I mean, the fact that, yeah, everything that we've talked about with magic and considering it's been around, like some of these blades are how old, Robert? Like super, super old, right? I mean, Heartsbane is at least 500 years old, right?
Yeah, so they were all forged before the Doom of Valyria, which is 300 years ago. So some of them are significantly older than that, but we don't know any that like millennia old, but that doesn't mean there aren't any that are millennia old. But they're all at least 300 years old. And if you just think to yourself, if you would just like go to a museum and see a sword that's 300 years old, it's looking kind of worn. And the whole point here about the Valyrian steel swords is that they are not. They're looking as sharp and as hugely good quality as the moment that they were forged. So that I think you're absolutely right there with the question in the super chat. That is one of the key points about this, is that it has got durability and it survives for a very long time.
I mean, if there is, let's say there is blood magic involved in part of the process, Robert, I mean, especially king's blood. Using someone's blood, that is part of them, part of their life essence, essentially. So using that life essence and imbuing it with the blade essentially gives the blade life. So you would think that giving something that is not living life, that's kind of interesting, an interesting way to look at it.
Absolutely, and then when you break it in half, as happened to ice, you're then cutting that life in half as well. Can I just take us on then to a link to this? One of my other patrons' questions, Brian Price. Hi, Brian. Good to see you. Saying, I think I discovered the secret to making Valyrian steel in the books, at least. Tyrion in A Game of Thrones reflects about dragonbone, how it is dark and lighter than steel. He comments how it's used for bows with the Dothraki, and he mentions how dragon teeth in the skulls in King's Landing are sharp and absorb all light that touches them, all of which does seem to reflect the kind of language that we're using in about Valyrian steel. So is dragonbone used for making Valyrian steel, and is therefore this a link across to what might happen, why King's Landing might actually be important in the end game in the books, not just in the show? So what do you reckon in terms of dragonbone? Do you think that might be one of the constituents?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting. Disputed Lands, who also has an amazing YouTube channel, by the way. If you haven't went and checked it out yet, go check that out. She brings up that the Catspaw dagger has dragonbone, and that was it was Aegon, the first Targaryen, had that. So likely it was given to him from someone. Or passed down through the Valyrian family, from old Valyria. So that's really interesting. Dragonbone specifically, though, I mean, the fact that it is mentioned as dark and smoky, it is kind of interesting. Ice is mentioned as spell forged and dark as smoke, so that's certainly interesting. Obviously, Dragonglass has a similar mention as well. They're all kind of have similar properties to them, I guess, when it comes to how George mentions them within the books. I don't know specifically. I mean, in their hilts, I know in some of the blades' hilts, dragonbone is used specifically with the Catspaw dagger. We know that for sure. But I mean, we just don't really have any information on if dragonbone is a part of that process, Robert. I mean, it could be.
It could indeed be, and I think that perhaps it's the dragonishness that we get that is kind of reflected, and so this is perhaps a hint to the fact that this is dragon fire. So this is a kind of a few optical hints about light vanishing into it and the rippled effect and things like that. So that's where I see that link. Perhaps dragonbone is a constituent part. I actually don't think that. I mean, this sounds quite a sweeping comment. I actually don't care huge amounts about how it's made originally, because the recipe has been lost. I think that is one of those things. I don't think, in fact, I'd be quite disappointed if we suddenly get Sam magically discovers a way of making it again. I think that's almost almost too easy. I like the idea that there's a limited number of these swords, these weapons that are there that can be used. So I think that if suddenly we found a way of manufacturing thousands of these, that would just make the whole thing too easy for me. So I like the fact that it's a mystery. I like the fact that we do not know. For my money, I think that I like the idea that it's some combination of fire, probably dragon fire, blood sacrifice with the magic side, and probably also
dragon glass.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of dragon glass going on in there as well. So I think those are probably the ingredients that we've got going on there, along with actually just expert people making stuff and folding it back on itself many thousands of times, which would make an excellently strong steel weapon in and of itself without all the magic. So I would go there. And Disputed Lands, hi, great to see you there in the chat. Amanda has been on here a couple of times, and I know gets a lot of very positive feedback, and I will definitely be having Amanda back on here, Disputed Lands, Crowfoot's daughter, as soon as possible. At some point we'll get her back on here soon. And in terms of the cat's paw dagger, so that, just to be clear, That's the blade is Valyrian steel, the hilt is dragon glass, and that bit that we were reading, the bit of the book, was talking about the fact that the Valyrians did use dragon glass as a sort of a way to beautify or ornament certain things, including their
dragon bone as well. Dragon bone as well.
Shows, to my mind, that shows that they had dragon glass. Dragon glass, therefore, was something that they could have used. So it's not just like a material that they didn't know about that only came from Dragonstone. There was also dragon glass there in Valyria, which kind of makes sense. So I'm quite happy with that. Let's quickly check back in on see if there's anything else. Just a random question here, Kyle, when perhaps we'll come to a couple of questions in the chat as well. But Jane, one of my patrons, hi Jane, said Valyrian steel blade versus dragonglass dagger. Which one would you prefer?
Blade, it's got a longer reach. Unless you're a ninja like Arya, I mean, blade, it's not even close.
But if you had a dagger, Valyrian steel dagger versus a dragonglass dagger, which would...
Oh, sorry, my bad. Oh, geez. I mean, I think Valyrian steel dagger would be better than dragonglass. No, I mean, I just think, Valyrian steel seems to be more durable. I mean, I could be wrong on this one. Yeah, Valyrian steel dagger. Yeah.
I think I would agree with you completely. I think Valyrian steel all the way for me. I think dragonglass definitely has its place, and I think that the fact that both on books and show we've got a dragonglass mine shows that again, that has to be, this is Chekhov's mine, that we have to use the stuff that's in there, so we are going to get a whole load more dragonglass appearing, I think, both in books and show to aid the battle. But if I had a choice, I would definitely always take the Valyrian steel.
Dragonglass.
Go.
Dragonglass would be like, I mean, it would be like, when there's a chemical process, it would be at the very bottom. I mean, wouldn't like Valyrian steel be an evolved form of dragonglass? I mean, it just, yeah, that's all I really wanted to say.
So Higa Herga, super chat, thank you so much for that. Says that Valyrian steel obviously has memory. As Tobo Mott said, Ice's descendant sword stayed red after the betrayal of the owner. The steel remembers. So what do we think about that? I like this idea that the steel, Valyrian steel, is more than just an inanimate object. There's something going on there. That's something that remembers the magic that was imbued within it, perhaps the ownership that was there. But do you think that there's something more to it? Do you think it's just a thing that could be passed from one person to another? Longclaw, for example, was passed from House Mormont over to Jon Snow, and that didn't seem to make any difference. Do you think that there's a memory in there somehow?
I don't know about memory, but I will say this. Let's say the Azor Ahype prophecy actually happened and Lightbringer was actually a thing. Like, this guy actually had to stab his wife, and she died, and Lightbringer was actually a thing. Let's say hypothetically for a second, Robert, that Jon has to do this to Daenerys. Let's say show only, for example, and Daenerys has lit 2 fires, and Jon puts the blade in her chest and she dies, and then would her essentially essence go into the blade? Do you think? I don't know. I think it's definitely possible. This George does like to play around with consciousness and the soul and all of that. So I wouldn't say memory, but maybe characteristics. Maybe characteristics. Wouldn't that be a better word, Robert? I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I think memory is probably pushing it too far for me, but I do like the idea that there is something personal about a sword, and I think that the way that Ice has taken on the personality of the Starks and then was broken apart, and then that sort of ruptures it in a way. So I think that is it's a thematic thing rather than a specifically magical thing in terms of memory, I would personally say. And one thing while we're on the subject that I've been musing about, and guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. This is another one of these kind of like half thoughts that I've had that I at some point I might turn into a video, but I would love to hear your thoughts just to sort of carry on the process. So if we've got this concept that Valyrian steel is made definitely using fire and blood. So we've got blood magic, we've got sacrifice in some way, and we've got fire. What we have got in the Lightbringer and Azor Ahype myth is a memory of that same kind of thing. We've got him plunging after trying to forge this thing many, many days, forging this sword, and then he does the sacrifice, and then the fire emerges. Is this just a memory of how to make Valyrian steel, which doesn't necessarily mean that we're saying that this doesn't actually have a relevance in the future, because we already know that Valyrian steel is a way of killing the White Walkers. But is this a memory of the recipe of how to kill the others? What would you think on that one, Kyle?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. Lady Firesnow actually has a really interesting comment I thought I would bring up. Blood sacrifice seems more likely as king's blood is powerful, and Dany needed a sacrifice to hatch dragons, so that's evidence. What do you think about that? I mean, does that count as evidence, Robert? I mean, because we don't know exactly. I mean, it can be taken both ways. Maybe it is both metaphorical and physically a real thing. Maybe it happens both ways, because a lot of people out there, including myself, think that possibly the Azor Ahype prophecy serves as these three epiphanic moments that someone has, or transformative moments in someone's life that causes them to reach that Lightbringer moment in their evolution as a person. But also it could be for one specific set of people. It could actually, maybe it does actually mean that will physically happen for Jon and Dany or someone else. So I'm kind of torn, man, because George R. R. Martin likes to both be metaphorical and also do things and validate them, really do them. So I'm really torn, man. I don't really have a full-on answer for you.
And I think that's absolutely fine, because I don't think I've got a full-on answer here. But I think that there's for me, we will have contenders for Lightbringer in the same way we have contenders for Azor Ahype that we can discuss after this whole thing. We're not going to get somebody waving a big flag and saying, by the way, this here, this sword here, this is Lightbringer. We're not going to have somebody waving a big flag and say, this here, this is Azor Ahype reborn. We as readers are going to have to decide for ourselves and debate and discuss after all the books have happened what was going on. But I think that the constituent parts of Lightbringer, when we see it, will have to include fire, and they will have to include sacrifice. And I think that is one of the, you're very right about the fact George R. R. Martin likes to both use metaphor and sort of reality, as it were. But in terms of the Azor Ahype myth, the creation of Lightbringer, I believe one element of that is the metaphor that in order to be creating Valyrian steel, we need fire and blood sacrifice.
So let me touch on this for 2 seconds. I talked about two specific things, Robert. A transformative moment, but it can also represent a person, perhaps. So that could be a third thing. And George loves to do things in threes. Look at the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. Look at the hero's journey. This is basically what he's doing with The Song of Ice and Fire. He's telling the hero's journey through many different perspectives. So that is something that we also have to consider, that it could be a person. So adding a third. Oh, geez. We're going down all sorts of different roads now, Robert. My goodness.
Well, and I think that is exactly how it should be, because George R. R. Martin, when he was asked about TWOW, hi there, LML, I see there in the chat. I've stolen that from you. I'm going to say that TWOW from now on. TWOW, The Winds of Winter, is going to be complex. That is George's promise to us. So I think that the fact that we're seeing many layers to this, that is entirely right. And I saw actually, LML, when I was just name checking you, you were talking about perhaps a constituent part of the recipe, as it were, might be this kind of oily black stone from the heavens that has come down. This is, if you don't mind me saying, LML, classic LML, that if you're going to get magic, this is from a moon meteor. So I think that there's possibly some truth in this. For me, I think that the magic itself comes from above, but I do not think necessarily that oily black stone that we see only in a very few different places in Planetos, in the world that we have. I don't think that necessarily is part of the makeup. I think the makeup of Valyrian Steel has to be fire and blood. That's just my personal view, but we're getting a little bit behind on the super chats, and I just want to quickly catch up on them. House Kraken Tacos, $10. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Hey guys, killing your wife is never a hero move. I think I wouldn't want to speak for you, Kyle, but I think both of us will agree that killing your wife is not a hero move, although it's exactly, if you don't mind me saying, exactly the kind of thing that George R.R. Martin might make one of his characters do in order to produce some good thing. An evil might.
If you have basic human empathy, killing someone else in general is not good.
Yeah, so I think if you're going to take any moral lesson from this live stream, guys, then I think it's don't kill anyone, kids. Okay, so Brian Price, thank you so much. $10 super chat. What's the House Dane sword? This is called Dawn, the sword of the morning. Wasn't it made from some comet? It seems to be given significant mention. Should we expect to see it play a role in the story? So yes, this is unfortunately we're now getting back to moon meteors again. Hi LML. So yes, Dawn is an ancient sword. The Sword of the Morning is the name given to the member of House Dane who is deemed to be good enough, worthy enough to be wielding it. That's not every single generation. Sometimes they skip generations. You have to be worthy in order to wield it. But the sword is called Dawn, and it is not a Valyrian steel sword. This is a sword made from, as far as we can tell, a comet.
Or meteorite. Yeah, meteorite.
Years ago. So a meteorite. So this did indeed come from heaven. In terms of, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in a second, Kyle, in terms of its role on the show, I kind of hinted at this earlier. I think they showed it in passing in a way to say, look, here it is. This, we know this is an important thing, but we're not doing anything with it. It's a nod. It's an Easter egg. It's a wink. That's basically what it was. Pardon me. In the books, then I think that there is obviously a whole extra layer going on here. Because House Dane does not appear really on the show. They basically cut out any House Dane references, which I think is a shame, but I understand when they cut things out, they had to keep the story slim. But they will be involved in the books, and Dawn, for me, is far too obvious a name for a sword not to be involved in the battle for the Dawn. So I think that it will have a role in the books, in probably to the last book. It will be brought forward from Starfall, and there will be a worthy wielder of it. Kyle, what do you think? Do you want to just talk for a little while about Dawn? What role you think that has?
Well, I mean, more interestingly than Dawn, House Dane's actual house words, we don't really know what those are, Robert, right? So that's something that's really interesting. House Dane being one of the first major houses that was really looked at. I mean, and like you said, they've kind of seemingly went down in importance, but at the end they're going to make some sort of kind of they're going to have this like stratospheric re-entry into the story because of this sword. Now, of course, in the show, did Ned bring him back to Winterfell in the show or something? I don't know, man. But in the books, it's definitely going to be important because that sword has specific. It's specifically rare, even more rare than Valyrian steel, it would seem, Robert, because came from that one meteorite or that one comet, whatever it was that House Dane discovered, and then they made that sword. So I do agree with you. Is my final point here on Dawn. I do think it's going to be very important in the books. Whether that is Lightbringer, I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case, because I actually prefer that Lightbringer is an epiphanic moment, like a transformation for someone, like a realization, for example. But I think that it will be important. I mean, they need good swords to fight against the White Walkers. But will it have the same effect, though, Robert, as Valyrian Steel? That's the question. Maybe it doesn't.
Indeed, and that's actually well segued in. I don't know if that is intentional or not, Carl, but that goes to our next super chat from Sheeny Donut, which says, any possibility that Dawn may not work against the others? It doesn't seem to have been imbued with any sort of magic unless the rare metal is enough. Now, I would say that, first of all, to take a step back, we do not know about how it was forged. We just don't have any detail of that. We know where it came from. We know that it got turned into a sword, and that's pretty much it. So we don't know whether there are any magic spells cast over it. The implication is that it must be magical, because things that come from the heavens seem to be magical. The implication that it must be magical because it has survived for as long as it has. This has survived for millennia. So and it is still an incredibly rare sword, and it's also and LML is the expert on this, but I think it sort of glows white. It's got this. It's different to the other swords that are there. So the idea very much is that this is a special sword. It is magical because this is a magical world. Will it work, so to speak, on the others? We do not know, because we have not seen that happen in the books. We haven't seen the others in combat much at all, really, to be honest. So we do not know what's going on there. So do I think that it will not work against the others? I think it probably will, but I think that it's probably going to be different in a way that we do not yet understand. Do you want to add anything on that, Carl?
Yeah, I mean, it's described as pale as milk glass, which is interesting, which, I mean, the others are described very similarly as well. But, you know, one thing that George likes to do, and I kind of want to reference this in with Dawn, but maybe this was House Dane's epiphanic moment or moment on how to make better weapons. We got to think about that too. So we actually think that it was a comment and all. It was actually made from, I mean, maybe it's just a big story to get people to believe in something. And there's a lot of that going on within A Song of Ice and Fire, Robert. So we can't discount that, right? I mean, this whole, as above, so below type deal that is going on. I just don't want to discount that either, because George does love to trick everyone. So, but, you know, I mean, is it 100% confirmed that Dawn is made from a meteorite? I mean, it's got to be written down in a book and shown to me. You know what I'm saying? For me to be like, okay, like that's really what's going on here.
Yeah, and it's probably worth just going back to something George R. R. Martin has said on a number of occasions, is that anything that happens in the Age of Heroes, anything that happens millennia ago, is legend. We shouldn't take it as literally what happened. He's said this again and again and again. It's just that they're legends in the way that we might talk about the Epic of Gilgamesh or Noah's Flood. These are things that there's clearly something going on there. But the exact details are perhaps disputed, even within, and I'm not going to get into the details of this for obvious reasons, but even within the Bible, there's two different accounts of what happens in Noah's flood. So you get these things in George R. R. Martin's world are legendary. They are not literally true. They are. We should take lessons from them, but we shouldn't necessarily think that they are exactly what happened at that particular time. Which perhaps rounding off are talking about the sword Dawn. Charity K, one of my patrons, was asking what the connection was between Valyrian Steel and Dawn. Is Dawn some sort of proto-Valyrian Steel blade? the original ice, a blade of the others, or something else entirely? I hope we've sort of answered that already. I've seen people say that this is the original version of ice. Some people that I respect their views, but I've never actually investigated that line, so I don't know quite where that's come from. Until I see something that convinces me otherwise, I would say that Dawn is probably roughly what we know it to be, which is a sword, which is a magical sword that has come from a meteorite that has landed at Starfall, and that is where it has come from. And until I hear or see something persuasive otherwise, and please do send me something convincing to tell me otherwise, but until otherwise, that is what I think it probably is. I think that it is not actually anything to do with Valyrian Steel. I think it's a separate thing. Let's just take a pause. Jace, I saw your super chat. We'll come to that in just 1 second. As I always do, just sort of halfway through a live stream, I just wanted to take a moment to let you know stuff that's coming up. Guys, I know that a lot of you have been waiting for the next part of my series going through Robert's Rebellion, turning at Harrenhal, and the Tower of Joy. The next part is almost ready. Sorry, I know it's taken a little while longer than I had hoped, partly because of life, but partly also because this one's going to be another one of those epic length videos. It's going to be, I think it'll turn out to be a half an hour or so. Again, this is going to be quite a long video looking at the last bit of Robert's Rebellion, centering around the sack of King's Landing, which I think the more I look into it, that sows the seeds of so much of what has happened in the books that we have. The relationship between House Lannister and the Martells, and therefore what the Martells have been up to, what Ned Stark's view is of different characters, what this means for the succession, and a huge amount of other issues all come, and Ned's relationship with Robert Baratheon as well. Huge amounts of different things all center around what happened in that really small period of time there. So we're going to be focusing a lot in on that, and then moving up to that question I get asked a lot, which is how did Ned know where to go to the Tower of Joy? How did he know that was where he was supposed to be going? So that's what the next main video is going to be on that series. The other thing I would say, other than my usual patrons, thank you. I cannot do this without you. I really appreciate all of your support. And guys, if you do enjoy the channel, if you enjoy my output, and you'd like to support in Deep Geek or get access to some other stuff I do just for my patrons, there is a link down there in the description to my Patreon page. I'd love you to become a patron. But the other thing I would say is my second channel, The Well Told Tale. We are now halfway through Frankenstein. It's basically me reading what I consider to be the finest science fiction and fantasy stories ever written. It's just me doing an audiobook effectively each time, once a week, about 3/4 of an hour per episode, uninterrupted by adverts, so it doesn't disrupt the flow of the story. It's just me reading things, and I love doing it. And guys, if you're interested in that, again, I'm sure the mods will put a link there in the chat, but again, there's a link down in the description. But Kyle, I know you've got a lot that you're planning that's coming up. What's going to be happening on your channels?
So actually, I got a fun video planned for this Saturday. I'm going to be releasing. I'm gonna present a case for Game of Thrones season 8. Going to be great, and I'm going to kind of present it like a lawyer would to a jury, and that's going to be coming out on Saturday on my channel. Tomorrow I'll be going live. Me and Gemma usually have a podcast on Fridays. For those of you that don't know, Secrets of the Citadel, she's my co-host. We do all sorts of fun podcast stuff together. She's actually on vacation, but tomorrow I'm going to be talking about what we might see in the Game of Thrones season 8 trailer, doing some speculation. That's going to be really fun. Me and J.R. Rowley are working on the Saturday video together. J.R. Rowley is a writer from my channel. He's in the live chat right now. He's been doing some helping out, and he's got some great ideas. So that's really fun. But yeah, no, I'm going to be starting a new What If series, and a new What If series, and that's going to be really fun. And it's going to be What If Sandor Clegane fights a White Walker in Game of Thrones season 8, and it's actually based off a piece of art that Urtach Altanaz made. I don't know if you guys have checked out the piece, but it's Sandor Clegane wielding a fiery sword and the Night King on Viserion and Arya in between behind the Night King. So I'm going to speculate a little bit about that. All of you know that Sandor is my favorite character, and I'm gonna get into some really fun predictions and stuff like that. So that's kind of what's coming next on the channel for me, Robert. And then after that, there's a couple of other shows that I'm going to be covering. Me and King McKay, a YouTuber from New Zealand, actually, we're going to be covering The Last Kingdom and Vikings together. Really excited for that. Vikings comes back on November 28th. If any of you watch Vikings, and The Last Kingdom's another great show on Netflix, following Uhtred Ragnarsson and Alfred the Great in England. So that's kind of what's up for me, Robert. Really excited for that. If you do want to see kind of extra bonus content, what's coming up with stuff like that, you can join my Patreon as well.
Fantastic. And guys, you know I only have people on this channel that I would personally recommend their stuff. Please do go and check out Kyle's channel. It is Azor Ahype. He produces some excellent stuff, and I personally love the kind of the what if video, so I'm very much looking forward to that. And actually, talking about excellent creators, I see Joe Magician out there in the chat. Hi Joe. Joe is an excellent YouTuber who's not got enough subs. He deserves, for the quality of what he does, he deserves a huge amount more subscribers than he has, and I am ever so subtly trying to persuade him to come onto a live stream at some point. So feel free to put some pressure on him in the chat. Sorry, Joe. But let's get back to Valyrian Steel. We've got a few questions about not the weapons, but the other things that Valyrian Steel makes. So we had a super chat from Jace. I said we come to this. Thank you very much for the super chat, saying, any thoughts of the symbolism of the Valyrian Steel link representing the study of the higher mysteries on the maester's chain? So this is talking about the fact that all the maesters, you know, they've got their chain. Each link within the chain represents something that they've studied, something that they've mastered. They have to do a test to show that they understand it. And each of the links is actually, although on the shows it looks like they're all the same kind of thing, each link is actually made from a different metal or different substance. And the one for the higher mysteries, magic, effectively, is made out of Valyrian steel. Now, we know that this is quite a rare thing for maesters to do. The maesters don't encourage it. They are pretty much, as an organization, they're against magic. We know of two maesters who have got it. Archmaester Marwyn, who's in the books, not on the show, but in the books, and will be quite important. He's going over to find Daenerys at this point in the books, and also Maester Luwin had a little chain as well from Valyrian Steel. So that's what's going on there. So they clearly have the knowledge, the maesters this is at the Citadel, the knowledge of how to reforge Valyrian steel into a little link in a chain, and B, they have to have a stash of Valyrian steel somewhere in order to allow them to do that. But I think the question here, and I think it's an excellent question, is what's the symbolism going on there? Is there anything more than the fact that simply this is just like the old magical ways? Is there anything else going on there, Carl, do you think?
You know, it's really interesting, Robert. Is the Valyrian steel link circular? Can we confirm that?
Well, I think it's sort of ovalish. I don't think we've got an exact description, but as I always say, whenever these things happen, there are cleverer people and more knowledgeable people than us in the chat. So guys, if you know what the shape of the link, specifically the Valyrian steel link, is, do put it in the chat there. It would be great to see.
Because if it is circular, if we think of all the lessons we learn in life, let's say, Robert, we have 6 or 7 big moments that change our life, and we come full circle each time, and when that moment happens, we've learned something new that completely changes our life. Think of the Valyrian steel link as kind of that last piece of enlightenment that they get before they could become really old maesters and everything that they've learned. So Valyrian steel is very, very important in that we see the circular nature of A Song of Ice and Fire. And it would be really interesting if the Valyrian steel link is circular in nature. I could be wrong about that. But if it is linked to these higher understandings of magic and kind of the occult and all of that, then that's then that's symbolic, because the Song of Ice and Fire is circular in nature. These different wheels that we have happening, obviously the wheel of all of the politics and all of these wars that are going on, but also the greater wheel that started with kind of the White Walkers and the Children of the Forest. And understanding these, you know, little heroes' journeys that everyone is going. Now, I wouldn't say little heroes' journeys, but these heroes' journeys that everyone is going on is pretty significant. And I think that Valyrian Steel is, if it is circular in nature, would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I absolutely would. I think that the symbolism here is very much that magic is associated within the maester's minds, at least with old Valyria. So the clear implication is that there is magic involved in the creation of Valyrian Steel, which we know already, and so having that link in there shows that that although magic is there, this was perhaps the maesters using that in a non-magical way, because when they reforged it, they did not use magic. They used their own knowledge and expertise in doing that. Two small bits of housekeeping just while I'm at there. Kyle pointed out, thank you very much, that I forgot to put the links in the description. In fact, I think I forgot to put anything in the description this time. If you're watching live, apologies. The link I was talking about was patreon.com/Deep Geek. So apologies, it's not there. If you're not watching live, hopefully the description will be in there. And secondly, Joe Magician, thank you. You've for saying you would love to come on. We will definitely sort out a topic and get you on at some point soon. And a couple of people have name checked Joe Magician's recent video on Waymar Royce. Now, I've not seen this, but occasionally within this community, a video comes up that lots of people are talking about, a new idea. It's quite rare, actually, within the Game of Thrones community that new thoughts and new ways of looking at things come up. And there's a lot of buzz about this video, so I would highly recommend that you go and have a look at it. Tell me what you think, because I will definitely be looking at it when I get a moment at some point in the next day or so. But yeah, go to Joe Magician's channel, if one of the mods could put a link there, and check out his Waymar Royce video. I think, from what I've heard, this is trying to go back to the very first, the prologue to the first book, and trying to draw out some hints there about the way that the others reacted to and perhaps even targeted Waymar Royce, and why did they target him in particular, which I think is a fascinating question. Brian Price, thank you again, $10. That's very kind. Can you please speculate on the White Walker blades? They shatter steel. They hold their own against the Valyrian Steel sword. Could they be the ice counterpart of the fire-based Valyrian sword? That's a fantastic question. So we don't, again, in the books, we do not know the details of this. And in a moment, I'll ask Kyle to speculate wildly about it. But that realistically will be what we can do. That we know that they have craft to use ice to create weapons. And yes, they might well indeed be a sort of a counterpart to Valyrian Steel, but we do not know the details of this because we do not know the details of the culture of the others. But Kyle, have you got any thoughts about that on the parallel between the White Walkers, the others' weapons, and Valyrian Steel?
Yeah, that is really interesting. I mean, if we think of, I like to think of Dungeons and Dragons, Robert. There's always some sort of beast or boss or villain that has some sort of weakness. Well, fire and ice are opposition of each other. Daenerys's dragons, right? I'm sure the White Walkers are weak to that. I mean, we saw some of that in season 7. And then the Night King threw a spear at the dragon, and he knew exactly where to throw it, and it exploded quite awesomely. I definitely actually think that's a possibility, man. The fact that these blades can counter the so-called fire element within Valyrian Steel, and then in part Valyrian Steel can kill the White Walkers. At least in the show, when we see them fight, Jon Snow has killed most White Walkers that we know of. Sweeping through White Walker, they just kind of dissipate. Now, we don't know if that's going to happen with the Night King. I'm assuming that there's a little bit something more there with him. I don't think that's exactly going to happen with him. I think we're going to have something different happening with the Night King because he is special in that respect. But I actually think that that's pretty spot on, really. I think that, the White Walker blades are kind of the Valyrian Steel blades can kill the White Walkers, but the White Walker blades can break any other blades. You know what I'm saying? So that's why when John parried the attack, we heard the pling, and I know my sound effects are awesome. Thank you so much. That's why the White Walker is surprised in that moment that the Valyrian Steel can counteract. Now, they are kind of equals, I guess. That is their Valyrian Steel. They are able to, it is said they are able to manipulate ice in ways that are unimaginable. So, yeah, I definitely think that's spot on.
I'd agree. So the point about the Song of Ice and Fire is that these are opposites. These are thematically every time we see fire, we have to be asking what's the ice opposite, because this is about two different forces that in and of themselves, each of them could destroy the world, and they are gonna clash. And so when we're looking at the weapons that the others have, these are they're not just made out of ice. They've not just got ice daggers. These are magical ice daggers and magical ice swords. And so in the same way that you might get, humans haven't just made swords out of metal, they've got magical metal swords. That is where, and those are imbued by fire magic. That is where the kind of the equivalence comes, where the balance between the two things come.
One more thing, Robert. One thing that's really interesting: if you get fire and ice, you get water, and water is mostly a representation, or usually used symbolically as a symbol of life. So if the two cancel each other out, which is what's pretty much going to happen, we're having our own, I like to say, Ragnarok in Westeros. We're having our own apocalyptic battle where two forces cancel each other out, the dragons and the White Walkers, and magic ends up, leaving what's left behind, a small amount of people that are able to rebuild. So I think that's kind of what's going on there. These two forces are being used for this giant war, and then we're going to be left with what's left, and that's life, humanity. There's only going to be humanity left, no magic.
Yeah, I've gone over this subject a number of times, and I think the short version there is I agree. But we've got another few super chats to get to. Coulter Grayson, thank you so much. That's very kind. In the show, John tells the Northern Lords about dragonglass and how they need to mine it, but never mentions Valyrian steel. Why do you think that is? Great vids. Thank you so much. I think for me, that is simply a matter of how many Valyrian steel blades there are. He knows that there is a mine that can get hundreds, thousands of dragonglass weapons, which seem to be effective against the White Walkers and against the Whites. And yet there are probably, once you get rid of the few the Valyrian steel weapons that have disappeared or whatever, you've got a couple of hundred or so Valyrian steel weapons, and they have got hold of the ones that they can get hold of. Valyrian steel weapons are held very tightly to houses. They do not let go of them. Even really poor houses do not sell them, because it's a symbol of how great they are as a house there. So they don't get rid of them at all. So basically he will know that it would be an impossible task to try and persuade somebody to lend him their Valyrian steel sword. They either come to battle with their Valyrian steel sword, or it does not happen at all. So that's what it is. So they have got the Valyrian steel swords that they've got, the ones that are up in the north. There are a few others that I'm sure they can bring in from elsewhere, but he does not need to give them the speech. He needs to give them the speech about the fact that he might be able to arm an entire army with dragonglass. He could not arm an entire army with Valyrian steel, because you cannot make any more of it, is the fundamental point. Anything else on that one, Kyle?
Ditto. That's exactly what I would have said.
Excellent. Well, I hope that one answers that for you. Miss Moonlight, €5. Thank you very much. Do you think there is still some Valyrian steel hidden in old Valyria? And thanks for making my day, guys. You are great. You're very welcome. Do I think there's still some Valyrian steel hidden in old Valyria? Yes, I definitely do. I think that the fact that people go there, they disappear. For one, we know one sword, the Bright Raw, the House Lannister sword, went over there with King, was it Tommen II, the Lannister, who went over there and never returned. So that was we know that's there. But even more importantly, the Valyrians produced Valyrian steel firstly for themselves before exporting it to Westeros. So yes, there will be a lot there. And in a moment, I want to link across to the Valyrian steel armor that we know that Euron, in the books, Euron emerges with some Valyrian steel armor. Lady of the Leaves over on Patreon said that could please mention the armor. If I were to go into battle with the others, I would definitely want to wear Valyrian steel armor. And the key thing here is that came from or at least Euron claims that came from Old Valyria. He went in there, he took it, he gathered stuff. Dragonbinder, similarly, the great horn that he has, that has Valyrian steel banding on it. So it seems that there's a lot more of it over there. It's just that people don't go there and come back. So, Kyle, do you think that there's, in the books, assuming you agree that there is more over there, in the books, do you think there's a chance anyone might actually go and bring some back?
I mean, I think there might be more than just Valyrian steel blades. Euron has acquired Valyrian steel armor, and there's a dragon binder, and I'm sure there's some sort of other artifact or some sort of other thing that is Valyrian steel imbued. So, yeah, I mean, yes, there's apparently 1,000 Valyrian steel blades. That's the rumor. I mean, yeah, definitely.
Excellent. And Sanrixian saying, going to be popping in and out. Just wanted to show my support. Thank you very much. $10 for the super chat. Sorry, it's not proper money, Robert. That's yeah. That's I will probably never live that down. Dollars are indeed proper money. Thank you so much. That is very kind of you. We had another super chat again from Coulter Grayson. Thank you. That's very kind. Sorry for the off-topic show question. But why do you think Rhaegar had 3 Kingsguard guarding a pregnant Lyanna at the Tower of Joy, but no Maester? Well, I'm going to be coming on to the Tower of Joy in my series, working my way through what happened all through that period. So I will come to some answers about that in due time. But I think that the bits, and I'd be interested in Kyle's thoughts on this, because I'm basically stealing everybody's ideas before coming out with my video. But in terms of the Kingsguard, the role of the Kingsguard is to guard the king and the royal family, and so that is why they were there. Was there a maester? Do we know there wasn't a maester? We don't know there wasn't a maester there, is the short answer. We don't know much at all about what was going on. The fact that Lyanna gave birth, I wonder whether or not Rhaegar, given how important he thought that child was going to be, would actually have just let her give birth on her own without anyone there to help with the birth. I suspect that's highly unlikely. So I think there certainly was someone there to help with the birth. Whether that was a midwife of some kind or a maester, I do not know. But there were more characters there than the characters that we know that have been named. And the only thing in the books that we really know about it is Ned's fever dream that we shouldn't take seriously, because he was tripping out a bit at the time. But Kyle, what do you think about whether there might have been a maester there?
No idea. I have the same thoughts as you, Robert. I mean, I think, do we get another flashback to the Tower of Joy in the books? It's really hard to say. Hopefully, yeah, there will be some more light shed on it. I don't necessarily. Why do they need a maester though? I mean, is it because Rhaegar and Lyanna also got married in the books, and that was kind of a thing, and he was there to confirm her death or something like that? I don't know. I don't think there's really a reason for a maester to be there. There was a wet nurse, and I mean, the more people that knew about this, the more Jon was in danger, right? So I don't think there was a maester there personally, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think my personal guess is that there probably wasn't a maester, because Rhaegar and Lyanna, they were going off grid. And I think the moment you had a maester involved, then you think that might then go back to the Citadel. And he was all about the prophecy and the magic and all of the things that the maesters probably weren't for. So the idea that there was a maester there probably wouldn't have actually worked with that. But I think that we shouldn't assume that just because we haven't been told about some people being there doesn't mean that they weren't there. And I'll just drop in the two words Ashara Dane and leave it at that, because I think that she is probably the most likely other person to be there. But we're digressing. Thank you very much for that super chat. But I think we're going slightly away from the topic. So thank you for bringing us back. Who else? Patricia Olbert or Olbert, perhaps. €5 saying, "What's the story with Euron's armor? Do you believe it's real, and where does it come from?" Now we've sort of half answered this, I think, by saying that. The story is that he went over there and he came back with it. Euron is given to lying, let's put it that way. So do you think, Carl, there's a chance that actually, although he's like kitted himself out in this, and we only see it very briefly in the preview chapter from the Winds of Winter, so he doesn't talk about it, we just see it in the distance, him wearing it. And Aaron Greyjoy looks and goes, that looks like Valyrian Steel. Perhaps he's not. Perhaps he did go over there after all and collect all these things. Do you think there's a chance, though, that he was lying?
It's described, the way it is described, Robert, sounds eerily similar to what Jon is wearing during his dream when he's fighting the others and knocks down a Greek from the wall, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it's actually the real deal in the books. And it's just something that George would do. You know what it just seems like something that George would do. Jon Snow or someone wearing Valyrian steel armor being protected from the Night King's blade, or getting pierced from all sorts of different things that the White Walkers can do, the others can do. I think it's legit, man. I don't know. I think it's legit.
I would agree. I also think it's legit. I think that we have to accept that Euron is the kind of guy who would go there. Most people wouldn't go there. He would go there, and he has brought back things like Dragonbinder that appears to have Valyrian steel on it. So I see no reason why he didn't also bring that back. I would very much agree with all of the people who say I would love to have this, and talked about the question from Patreon earlier, love to have this in the battle, and I think that this is perhaps something that will happen. I think it will be used in a conflict with the White Walkers, with the others later on down there. The moment you introduce it, you can't just get rid of it. It has to have some kind of purpose. Mazamonti, great to see you. £5. Saying, do you think it was normal practice for Tywin to keep ice and not give it back to the Starks, traitor or not? This is a very good question. So it's what happens when you kill someone and take their sword? Can you just take it for yourself? I think this is one of those things that actually happened so rarely that it was traitor is probably the wrong way of saying it, but I think that Tywin just used his power to take it rather than saying, I have now defeated Ned Stark, therefore it's mine. I don't think that's how it worked. I think basically what it was that Tywin decided to make the rules up as he went along. He was the person who had control, he had the power, he had that in his grasp. And House Lannister had long been trying to get hold of another Valyrian steel blade, and suddenly one came into his possession and he could do with it as he wished. So I think that this was more a matter of him doing what he wanted because he had the power to do what he wanted, rather than this was just the way of the world. This was how things worked. Kyle, what do you think? Was it a cheap move on his part?
Oh, dude, Tywin Lannister. Oh my God, have people not read the books, bro, and watched the show? Tywin Lannister did some awful shit, man. Catelyn and Robb both got assassinated at the Red Wedding. Why do you think that is? Tywin was a big part of that. They took ice and split it into Lannister blades. That hurts, man. That's what I have to say about that. I am a Stark supporter. Come on now.
Yeah, I'd agree. So basically,
Tywin did a lot of shady shit.
He did, and I think that if House Rain had a Valyrian steel sword, then he'd have stolen that. Any chance he'd have got to have taken one, he would have done that. So it was just him being powerful and doing what he wanted. He didn't really care about the rules. LMC, $15. Thank you. That's very kind now. Saying, I got to go now. Still at work. Still at work. So you've been watching this at work. Kudos. And time for my last meeting. Keep up the fabulous work. Thank you so much. That's incredibly kind. Guys, we've got... I'm going to start wrapping up soon. I've got one or two more questions from Patreon to get through. I'm going to bring this one back to, and this is Piano Diva 11. Thank you very much over on Patreon. Talking what we talked about a couple of times about this idea about the blood sacrifice. If the recipe for Valyrian steel does indeed involve blood sacrifice, do you think the ethical dilemma surrounding that will come up in the show? Everyone thinks Gendry is going to forge Valyrian steel. But having nearly been made into a sacrifice himself, I can see him absolutely refusing to go ahead with it if that were the case. Do you think, Carl, I think this is a fantastic question, by the way. Do you think that if it becomes known that the way to create Valyrian steel is through blood sacrifice, that ethical dilemma is going to be put in front of someone who is going to really struggle with it? Not the kind of the equivalent of the Tywin Lannisters who would just do it whatever because that's what they're about, but someone who would really struggle with this idea.
I mean, there seems to be a thing of death pays for life, and there's all sorts of interesting philosophies in religion and in the world about how death and life are connected together. It certainly seems to be connected within the Song of Ice and Fire. I just don't know. I do know that Dragonfire is Dragon Flame. Part of me is 100% involved in the process. Yeah, I can maybe get behind that idea. Resurrections, 100%. I do believe that death pays for life. I think that, like for example, Shireen's death helped pay for Jon Snow's resurrection. That is something that I believe. I can't answer that 100%, Robert, but jive with what the House of Black and White seems to say. The sentiment is, oh geez, yeah. I mean, even skin changing and all of that. The Varamir 6 skins chapter, having a second life within someone else. That's kind of pretty interesting too. That is not as similar as death pays for life, but it is death and life together. Yeah, I'm gonna say no, but there's a possibility because of how strong blood magic is. Maybe King's blood specifically, yeah. Or Queen's blood, sorry.
Yeah, so I think, as I said, I think that the whole idea of forging new Valyrian steel, I think is a fascinating one. I think that the whole, the knowledge of how to do that, I hope has been lost. I say I hope it has been lost, but I hope it doesn't come back so that we can create lots of new ones. So I like the idea of there being perhaps just one. I think that the link across, even if it's just a thematic link across to Lightbringer, is very strong. And I think that putting in front of people this idea of there has to be a sacrifice in order to create this magic to win the day in some way, I think that is very likely to come through in the last book or two. I think that is very much the case of where this is heading. And I think that George R.R. Martin loves putting his characters into ethically kind of questionable situations where they have to make up their mind on what to do, particularly does the end justify the means? Does can doing a small evil just be justified because it is going to lead to a greater good at the end? That's the kind of thing that he loves talking about. So we are going to finish in about 5 minutes. So the guys, this is your last call for questions. If you want to drop any final questions down into the chat, I'm going to talk for just a moment while Kyle, if you want to have a flick through and see if there's any questions you think would be really good for us to just to be ending off with. But Kyle did drag one out from the chat a long time ago that I think he thought it would be really interesting to have a quick chat about, which is sort of a tangential link perhaps to what we've been talking about. This was Sammy V, who was asking, do you think that it's just a coincidence that Ned hired the first sword of the Sea Lord of Braavos, or do you think it is to link him to Dany? I don't think George R.R. Martin is about writing coincidences. I think this is a really interesting one. I've already talked, one of my last videos was about Dany and the Lemon Tree and the House with the Red Door. I think that she was from the age of 0 to 5-ish, she was living in the estates of the first Lord of the Sea Lord of Braavos, and I think that there is a clear link there to when we've got Syrio, who was the first Sword of Braavos, who was effectively in charge of the personal security for the Sea Lord. And I think there's an interesting link across there, which means that probably Syrio was there at the time protecting the Sea Lord when Dany was there. So he probably saw her and knew of her at the time. So I think there's an interesting link there. Personally, I think that is just one of these coincidences. I think that we can't, not everything has to just tie together, and I think George R. R. Martin is writing a complex, multi-layered story where not everything has to link. I think it's just the fact that there happen to be two people in the same place at the same time. But is there the point, the wider point I think there is to show that there is a link between Dany, the Targaryens, and Braavos, a big political faction in Braavos, and what was going on with the Martells. I think that is the link that George R. R. Martin is trying to draw out for us. I think he's trying to show us, and I think that is going to come to the fore in the last two books. I think we're going to see a lot of political shenanigans going on in Braavos, and I think we're going to see them pulling their weight in deciding who gets to be on the Iron Throne. And I think that the Martells, Doran Martell's plans are also going to come to the fore in the next two books. He has been desperately trying to get the Lannisters off of the throne and the Targaryens back onto it. So I think that is the link that has been drawn out through showing us Syrio Forel. But Kyle, I know you've been looking just in the chat. Are there any questions you think it would be good for us just to be finishing off with?
So Julie has an interesting one. I feel like that between Bran and Sam, they will find a method of making Valyrian steel, but one or more ingredients will be something we don't know about, that they can't find or is super rare. So is there, maybe there's a possibility that they can't get all the ingredients, Robert. That would be really interesting. But the big part of the question is at least for Game of Thrones Season 8, let's speculate, Robert. Bran, Samwell, Tyrion's going to be there too. Gendry will be there. Dany will be there with her dragons. There's going to be a lot of smart people in one place. I do think that there will be, whether Bran goes back in time and views how to see how they forged it or whatever, I do think that that's a possibility. I do think the duo of Bran and Samwell Tarly are going to be a force to be reckoned with in Game of Thrones Season 8. What do you think about that, Robert? I mean, Bran and Samwell, they've only kind of scratched the surface. And I think that we kind of got the first semblance of that. Obviously, Bran asked Sam to go back to confirm Jon's parentage. What if he asked him to go confirm other things? That's what I'm kind of proposing.
Yeah, and I think he probably will. I think that on the show, at least, Bran's primary role is to explain what's going on in the plot, explain some of the backstory. So I think, yes, we will see a little bit more of the backstory through Bran in season 8. In terms of, are they going to go back and learn how to make Valyrian steel blades? I suspect perhaps not. I suspect that what they've teed up is the dragonglass mines. I think that's the weapon that they've got there. I think that they've been foreshadowing that, not just with the thing that Sam says about, oh yes, there's lots of stuff going on there, we've seen it, but also Jon and Dany literally standing in them. So I think that they've shown that as being where they're going to get all of their weapons from. I think that on a technical level, we've got Gendry there who can reforge Valyrian steel, but he doesn't personally know how to forge it afresh. So I think that what we're going to see is perhaps him reforging some, but my guess is that season 8, yes, they're going to be extended episodes, they're going to be long episodes, but there's only 6 of them. They're going to be keeping very, very plot focused in this. And I think that what we're going to see is that they're going to say, well, these are the Valyrian steel swords we've got, and that's it. We're going to get a whole load of dragonglass coming up, and then we'll arm a lot of the soldiers there with dragonglass, and then that's going to be what they're going to do, rather than creating new Valyrian steel. That's my personal guess.
Robert, can I give one last bit of hype to the stream today?
Always, Kyle.
I'm going to go out on a limb right now and say that Gendry is going to learn how to forge Valyrian steel, not just reforge it, how to make it. And I think it's going to happen in Game of Thrones season 8. So everyone, if you do enjoy getting hype, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, Robert. Come to my channel, and I'm going to do a video on this. I also do live streams as well. I do a live stream tomorrow and on Sunday with one of our guests in the chat, Jared Rowley. Robert does come on our channel. He's actually going to join us for some season 8. Hopefully some episode reviews and stuff like that. Robert, I'm kind of putting you on the spot right now, my man. But I'm gonna go on a limb and get hype right now and say that it's gonna happen in Game of Thrones season 8. You heard it from me. All right. There we go. That's all I have.
Well, there you go, guys. You know where to go and get your hype from. I see in the chat that Joe Magician is now starting to go live. So, guys, if you want to head over there in just one moment, please do. I just want to personally say thank you, Kyle, for coming on. It's always a pleasure having you on the live stream, and I'm sure I'll have you back on again. And of course, I'd love to come on whatever you're doing, whenever you're doing it, mate. It's an absolute pleasure. Do you want to remind people where they can find you on the net?
Yeah, so Azor Ahype on all forms of social media, whether it's on Instagram. I do Instagram. I do food porn. For those of you, I'm a big foodie. I like to go and eat different foods, and I do like little cool vlogs. Twitter, also Azor Ahype, and on Facebook at Azor Ahype, and on YouTube, I'm called Azor Ahype. I love Azor Ahype. I've always connected with Azor Ahype theories and prophecy, so I decided that the name Azor Ahype. People were calling when I originally had my first channel, people were calling me the hype that was promised. So that's why we rolled with the name Azor Ahype. And you can find me on YouTube making regular Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire content.
Absolutely. And guys, please do go and check out Carl's channel. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that for the chat, there's been some fantastic questions going on in the chat. Particular thank you for the super chats. And if you are at all interested in supporting this channel, please do check out my Patreon page. There will, if you're not watching this live, there will be a link down in the description, patreon.com/InDeepGeek. That's where if you just want to support the channel, or if you'd like to get access to some stuff that I do just for patrons. But thank you so much, everyone. I'll be back here same time next week with another topic and another guest, and it's been fantastic. Thank you, Kyle, and I shall see you all again soon. Take care.